If you live near the coast anywhere in New Zealand, this next story has meaning for you. 6 homeowners in Matata, a small town between Tauranga and Whakatane, may soon be forced out of their homes and off their land because of the local council saying it's too dangerous for them to live there anymore. If that happens, Checkpoint understands it will be the first time in New Zealand that private homeowners have had their land use rights removed from them in such circumstances. It's a precedent that with sea levels rising and coastal communities now facing frequent destruction in storms and cyclones, could see people's rights across the country are being abandoned, effectively meaning they are forced from their homes. But nobody outside of Matata is being allowed to have a say, which the homeowners and even the local council say is wrong. Zach Fleming and cameraman Nick Monroe went to Matata.
For 13 years, a tight-knit cul-de-sac community 24 kilometres north of Whakatane has been fighting a losing battle, and it's starting to take its toll.
It doesn't matter what we say, they're not going to change anything anyway.
Matata resident Rick Wally's commitment to his cause is as strong as ever, but his hope is fading. Since a massive landslide, which the experts call a debris flow, cascaded down the steep coastal hills behind Clem Elliott Drive in 2005 and levelled 27 homes on the street, his life's been uncertain.
You know, we are still living 13 years after the event as if that event just happened yesterday.
The clean-up of that debris flow ran into the tens of millions. It brought down boulders the size of cars, many of which are still there today. But a year later, the Whakatane District Council let Rick and his neighbours rebuild, saying it could mitigate the risk of another debris flow. Then it changed its mind in 2012, after 6 years of expert advice, and offered what residents labelled a pitiful deal, around half what their homes are worth, to give up their land, leave and don't come back. They've been fighting ever since, but that fight's nearly over. On the 20th of February, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council accepted a proposed plan change that would remove Rick and his 15 neighbours' land use rights, and then limit who can have a say.
Largely a local issue that needs to be dealt with.
Norm Bruning, a Bay of Plenty Regional Councillor, he voted alongside 8 of 9 other councillors for that plan change to only be locally notified. In other words, only those directly affected can make a submission. That's around 400 people.
Really, I think there's just such an enormous principle here that it needs to be nationally notified.
Which is why Bill Clark voted for the entire country to be allowed to have a say on what's happening in Matata.
My view is probably more expansive. I do believe that the folks in Invercargill should know what's going on here and have a right to actually participate in the conversation.
Here's what Whakatane Mayor Tony Bond told me last year.
Yeah, this is going to be a precedent for New Zealand, and with climate change, yes, there are going to be places in New Zealand which are going to be in the same situation, unfortunately, in the future.
All over the world, including here in New Zealand, people in coastal communities are at risk of losing their homes due to climate change. Scientists have predicted, worst-case scenario, sea levels could rise by up to 2 metres by the end of the century. Emily Grace is a natural hazards planning researcher at GNS Science.
I'm leading a research project that examines how to manage existing uses in hazard areas under the RMA.
She says the Matata situation is unique, so it's not a case of yes, this will make it possible to remove other people's land use rights, but
this is really the first time the RMA and the tools within it have been used in this type of manner, so to extinguish existing use rights in order to try and reduce risk. So this process could be applied in other places, although it would be applied in a different context.
Put simpler,
it will be an example that all councils refer to when they're considering similar issues.
Bay of Plenty regional councillors were given advice that what's happening in Matata will set a precedent. And the sole disadvantage listed for limited notification? Those with an interest in the wider principle, for example people on the West Coast, will not have the opportunity to make submissions. Norm Bruning says he voted solely for what's best for Matata.
And would it have been helpful for the rest of the country, politics and everything to be involved? I don't think it would have been helpful to these people.
Despite the wide-reaching impact Matata could have on the rest of New Zealand, Central government doesn't want a bar of it. The Whakatane District Council asked the Minister for the Environment, David Parker, to visit last December. Minister Parker didn't want to. His office passed that request on to the local government minister, Nanaia Mahuta. Minister Mahuta's yet to visit, and her office didn't respond to requests for comment. Minister Parker declined to be interviewed, but said in a statement that there's nothing legally he can do for Matata, but limited notifications are being looked at in the RMA review later this year.
I think the people in Coromandel who are going to look like they may lose their homes should have a say in what happens, because it is going to affect them. It is not just a Matata problem, it is nationwide.
The removal of Rick's land use rights involves a plan change at regional and district level, and the Whakatane District Council is yet to decide whether its change will be limited. So there's still hope, but little faith.
And we can't see any end of the tunnel at present, because we have no relationship or trusting relationship with the council. Everything that they do affects us significantly. Our homes, our lives, financially, socially, physically, spiritually, everything.
Despite the wealth of expert advice to the contrary, the residents believe the risk of another debris flow can be mitigated, perhaps by an early warning system. If the plan change goes through, it'll go to an independent commissioner. If they sign off, Rick and his neighbours will have a March 2021 eviction date, which they say they'll fight all the way to the Environment Court.
People say to me, well, why don't you just take the money and run, and go and live your life? But the trouble is, for the rest of your life, you'll be kicking yourself and saying, I should have fought. And you'll never be closure.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.